Rick Chapman will give the next presentation on Platforms to the Future. Rick Chapman is the managing editor and publisher of SoftLetter. Rick is also the author of SaaS Entrepreneur, the definitive guide to succeeding in your cloud application business. He has consulted in the industry for a wide variety of software and high technology firms such as IBM, Novell, Microsoft, Sun, and many others.
Hello, I'm Rick Chapman. I'd like to welcome you to the Business After Windows Monoliths End and Platforms to the Future presentation. Some quick information about me. I'm the publisher and managing editor of SoftLetter. I can be reached at the links below. Also feel free to reach me on any social platform that you find that you're most comfortable with. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, if you'd like to give me a call to discuss any aspect of this presentation or anything else involving the software industry, please feel free to do so. Quick plug for some SoftLetter and related items. Available in 2 weeks is the second edition of SaaS Entrepreneur, the definitive guide to succeeding in your cloud application business. Sorry for that huge title, but it performs well in the SEO engines. SaaS Entrepreneur is designed to be a comprehensive book to succeed SaaS and mobile applications companies in succeeding in their business endeavors. It consists of 432 virtual pages. Actually, we're a little higher now in the second edition. It's $49.99. It's available going forward as an ebook only. Incorporates 200 charts and tables with up-to-date research on every aspect of the SaaS industry. Over 650 goals and success checklist points, a downloadable virtual DVD that includes templates, spreadsheets, and Excel spreadsheets that map out your goals and success items. And you can read excerpts from all 10 chapters at the link that you see, www.saasentrepreneur.com. A little more information about SoftLetter and our research publications of interest to many companies if you're in the SaaS space is the SoftLetter SaaS Report and the SoftLetter Direct Compensations and Sales Efficiency Report. These latest versions of the reports are due in the winter of 2015. A quick plug for my book. I'm an author, a novelist, as well as a writer of business books, so I will not miss this opportunity to get in a plug. But one of the reasons that I put this slide of my latest novel up here is that some of the concepts and ideas that you will see in this presentation today were conceived of while I was writing Rule Set, a novel of a quantum future. Okay, let's talk about something that's taking place in the software industry. It's in many respects sliding in under the radar, but it's a movement that's quickly growing in speed and influence, and you're going to be reading and hearing about this increasingly over the next several months and years. We're moving into the next evolution of software. You might think of this as SaaS 3.0 or 2.0, depending on how willing you are to use the numeric naming conventions that we like to use in software to try to get ahead of the marketing curve. This movement is one that I define as device independence, and what's driving this movement is the increasing proliferation of devices and data streams. I'd like you to just do a quick mental exercise here, and I'd like you to think of all of the devices that you currently own or are contemplating owning. I myself have a desktop, I have a clamshell laptop, I have an Asus tablet, it runs Android, God knows what version, KitKat or Jelly Bean or Swizzles or whatever. I have an iPhone, a 5S, which I'm going to hold on to because I like that form factor. I'm contemplating buying an Apple smartwatch when it comes out. And there are a whole stream of other devices that are coming into existence, wearable devices that keep track of your personal assets, wearable systems that track your biometrics and health, devices that manage physical assets and locations. This is sometimes referred to as the Internet of Things, wearables. There's also the Internet of Implantables. Increasingly, we're all becoming Borg, and new devices are being scheduled to be implanted into our bodies, such things as artificial pancreases, cardio monitors, devices that take pictures of your colon to check for such things as rectal cancer, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these things are going to be pumping out information about you across multiple channels across the internet and the cloud. Now, we have a problem with this, and the problem is this is becoming unmanageable from the standpoint of an individual being expected to purchase and then maintain and secure all of these devices. I'm sure you've all heard recently of that hack where Apple's iCloud drive system was broken into, and personal pictures of some famous actresses were released over the internet. Now, I'd like you again to attempt another mental exercise, and that is think about all the devices that I asked you to, rummage through in your inventory earlier, and ask yourself the following question: do you know how to secure each and every one of those devices? Do you know how to make them safe? Do you know how to turn off on all of those devices the settings that might conceivably leak personal information about you? Do you know how to properly upgrade them? Do you know how the various remote services that these systems like to use, the various iDrives and cloud drives and remote virtual drop boxes, do you know how they all work? Do you know how they all interact? Do you know how to make them secure? And the answer is, I doubt it. I certainly don't. I know how to make my desktop secure, and since it's a Windows desktop and I have a Windows laptop, I'm pretty good on that. When it comes to the iPhone, no clue really. I have spent some time looking into it, and it's supposed to be a fairly automated system, but if you were to say to me, do I know what happened with Jennifer Lawrence? I'd answer, no, I don't. Do you know how to prevent it from happening? No, I don't. Should I know it? Yes, but I have enough to do in my life just keeping my desktop and my laptop secure. Now throw in the tablet. I have no clue how to secure an Android tablet. I've had this tablet for 2 years. I use it all the time. I use it primarily for web browsing and ebook reading. And one of the reasons that's all I use it for is I'm a little afraid of it. I'm not exactly sure how to secure that tablet. I know it can be done. I know that Android has, good security in most respects. I know that there are good software programs that can be loaded onto it. I have worked through the settings. I think I understand how the settings work, but if you were to put a gun to my head and say, Rick, is that tablet secure? I'd have to be honest and say, not really sure. Why haven't you secured it, Rick? Well, I've got a lot of things to do in my life, and I just haven't got around to it, but one of these days I really will make sure that tablet's secure. Of course, that means that tablet's secure. What about the next generation of Android operating system, the next generation of iOS? How are they made secure? What do you need to do? Well, I'm going to have to dig deep and learn more and do this on a device-by-device basis as more and more devices come into my life. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that smartwatch. I'm not sure what its elements of vulnerability are going to be, but I do know at some level it will be vulnerable. So, what we're seeing happen is an increasingly, maze-like world springing up around us, in which multiple gizmos are supposed to be flowing into our lives, helping us integrate every aspect of our social interactions, our finances, our businesses, and yet no one is going to have time to manage all of this on a device-by-device basis. Now, the answer to this dilemma that we're all going to be facing is what I call the portable workspace. And what is the portable workspace? Well, I defined it as I was thinking about my issues with devices, and also writing my novel, in which I said, gee, the novel takes place in the future. How in the future do I conceive of people working with all of these different devices? And of course, as we move forward into the future, there is going to be another layer of devices that you and I have not even thought about, but are going to be coming into our lives. And out of that, I came up with the concept of the portable workspace. And I conceived of it as a virtual device that preserves your investments in applications, data, digital assets, books, music, video that you may have purchased or licensed, security, social and financial privacy, all at a central place, a central desktop or workspace, as it were, that is device independent. Now let me give you a practical example of why device independence is becoming increasingly interesting to people and increasingly important. And let's talk about Windows XP, an operating system that I think everyone here has heard of. XP was first introduced in 2001. Mainstream support for the operating system ended in 2009. It was extended in April of 2014. Yet, and I'm sure we've all heard about this, yet despite Microsoft's constant importunings to stop using XP, we'll give you money off on new software, we'll give you bucks off on tablets, if you don't stop using XP, the zombie apocalypse is going to hit humanity. People to date have refused to stop using XP. As of this presentation, I believe it's down to 20%. Don't get me wrong, I think that eventually people are going to give up on XP. It's going to become impractical to keep using it. But regardless of that, it still has 20% worldwide market share. Now, you have to sit back and ask yourself, why did this happen? And one of the primary reasons is there was never any way at a certain point to upgrade XP. If you own XP now and you attempt to upgrade it, you can only do that by installing Vista, which obviously no one is going to do. If you attempt to put Windows 7 on it, it blows away your XP installation, and you have to do everything have to reinstall and start everything from scratch. And Microsoft and a lot of other companies have found that increasingly people do not want to blow away working computing environments. Let me give you a personal example of what I mean. I've always built my own computers. It helps establish my nerd credit out there. It's something that I enjoy doing. It gives me an opportunity to sort of see what's happening in the world of hardware and get some hands-on. Now, in 2005, I decided to build myself a killer box. A brand new box. At the time, it had stuffed with as much memory as I could put in there, fastest processors I could get, big hard drives, dual graphics cards, super duper shiny fancy case, the works. I built the box, tested it, box was okay. So I started to go through the process of transferring from my old box into my new box. I imaged my system, I copied everything over, I booted up the new box, and Windows XP failed to load. Now I'm pretty expert at this, so I tried every trick in the book and called on the expertise of a lot of other people who knew every trick in the book, and we all failed to ever get this system to properly boot and upgrade. There was some type of hardware dependency that was built into the software, and despite all my efforts, I could never restore on the new box my old XP environment. So that meant to get up and running with the new box, I would have to reinstall everything. And that meant that all my macros, all my files, all my applications, all my digital assets, every customization that I'd done to the desktop, all my colors, font choices, the way my desktop was arranged, all of it was basically going to be lost. Now, this was such an agonizing concept to me that I held off on going through this process for 2 years. For 2 years, I had my new box sitting next to my old box while I continued using my old box. And finally, I put aside some time, and I would estimate that it took me probably between 1 to 3 weeks to actually finish the process of moving over. It was an agonizing experience. If you've ever dealt with it, you understand what I'm saying. Well, in 2012, this time with Windows 7, I went through the same thing. Built myself a killer new box, tried to back up and move my complete environment over, and failed. Completely failed. Another agonizing experience. And at the end of it, I was so furious with myself and with the entire experience of moving an environment over and facing the prospect of losing it that I said, I'll never do this again. I will be buried with my existing box and Windows 7. You'll pry it out of my dead cold hands when I'm literally dead and cold. And I took some of this angst and incorporated it into the novel, rule set. Now, let's move beyond stories of my pain and suffering and talk a little bit about what is a portable workspace. As I've said, it's a virtual device, and by that you might think of it as a Windows desktop. It could be an Apple OS desktop. It will probably look something like none of them and probably something like all of them, but it is a software entity that once you create it is persistent, and by that I mean it's never destroyed. Once you set up the workspace, you can enhance it, you can invest in it, you can extend it, you can add applications, you can customize it, you can do all the things that you would think that you'd want to do, but once it's built, it never goes away until you die, and even then, it may survive on a post-mortem basis. It might be, literally someday in law become an inheritable asset. It's usable in any location at any time. This is key. The portable workspace must be able to intelligently configure and optimize its interface to match the device's capabilities. If you've watched some of the earlier presentations in this series, you know that people like Paul Giarata of Catalyst Resources, Embarcadero, Jim Secor from Cashew, and other companies are already thinking and building applications to match this prognostication of how the portable workspace must act. And of course, this leads us to the final point as we discuss this concept, and that is hardware exists to host the workspace. It does not exist to capture it, trap it, or take control of it from you. In other words, in the portable workspace model, you as the individual exercise ultimate control out of this central focus of management for all of your computing assets. And this is a very profound thought because throughout the years of microcomputing and personal computing, we've all always handed over ownership of many aspects of our computing life to the operating system. We talk about ourselves as being Mac OS aficionados, Windows users, Linux fanatics, etc., etc. But in the world of the portable workspace, the operating system becomes increasingly less important. What is important is your relationship with that workspace, and it is a direct reflection of your own needs, habits, financial capabilities, and work and leisure activities. Now, once the portable workspace is created, it has to rely on what we call the transparent cloud. Now, what's the transparent cloud? The transparent cloud consists of an increasing numbers of integrated layers of service and data. If you are a software as a service company, this paradigm or model should be very familiar to you. In the world of the portable workspace, additional layers are going to come into existence. One is the OS layer. We'll talk about that a little later. The data layer, security and privacy, digital assets, and more. You could think of these layers as sliding in and out of a virtual infrastructure or foundation, and as needed or as not needed, being moved in and out, but always underlying and supporting the portable workspace. This concept is more than just talk and more than just speculation. At SAS University in Austin, 2012, Roger Sipple discussed at a keynote speech the connection cloud. Roger Sipple is a data maven. He's the founder of Informix, a billion-dollar database company, one of the major players in the 90s, and has been very successful in funding a couple of other billion-dollar companies that have grown up and gone to IPO. He knows a great deal about the world of data normalization, relational database systems, and all of it, the rest of it. And at Austin, he discussed a new system or service that he was creating, and he called it the connection cloud. The connection cloud, as he defined it, was a service layer designed to deal with the increasing blizzard of APIs being generated by SaaS firms. If you're in SaaS, again, the term API, Application Programming Interface, is very familiar to you. And what an API allows you to do, of course, is interchange data and other information between SaaS applications. SaaS, because of its nature, does tend to create siloization, and APIs have been developed as a means to cure that problem. The only trouble is that 65% of SaaS companies now provide a formally documented API. And while it's very useful to have one, implementing an API is a one-to-one task. And as the number of data sources you have to deal with increases, and the number of devices that are all pumping data across the internet increases, writing individual APIs to each and every device and data set and database out there becomes increasingly a dizzying and Sisyphean exercise. Sisyphus was that fellow in Greek hell who had to push a rock up a hill and then it would fall down, and you have to start and do the whole thing all over again. And if you have to implement a whole bunch of APIs in SaaS, it feels something like that. So what happened with the connection cloud was the model is you create a framework in which everyone plugs their API into this framework, providing a common highway for data interchange and integration. This was a very popular concept at Austin, and to show you how popular it was, Intuit, shortly after Roger's presentation, purchased the Connection Cloud, and undoubtedly is using it for its internal services. However, Roger was not the only person to have that idea, and I can tell you that several companies are actively involved in building that type of service layer. If we look at other areas such as security and privacy, you'll notice that the major companies such as Symantec and others are also starting to adopt this model and way of looking at protecting us, because again, the idea of attempting to secure an entire wilderness of devices out there on an individual basis is becoming increasingly onerous. It's increasingly difficult to see how this can be done without creating a much more integrated structure, which we call the portable workspace and the transparent cloud. We earlier talked about operating systems, and we also are watching the first generation of what you might call the OS layer coming into existence. I do urge you to sit through Paul Giarato's resource of Catalyst Resources Prezzo on how they're developing device-independent applications. They're not taking it to the operating system level yet, but if you look at his presentation, you can see how they're beginning to model and develop applications that are not tied to any particular device, and that are also intelligent enough and smart enough to start to auto-configure themselves based upon what the device's capabilities and parameters are. For this to take place, you're going to have the containerization of the OS and the presentation of it in an OS service layer. So you're going to see over the next several years applications becoming increasingly abstracted from the OS. The user interface, what we interact with and work with, is going to increasingly disconnect from the OS, and it will dynamically, on an as-needed basis, sort of connect with the OS at the service layer, connect with the device layer that will have to exist so that applications can take advantage of specific device capabilities. That's always been a tremendous objection to the write once, run anywhere concept that's been around in the industry since the P system, and has continued today with such coding platforms as HTML5 and JavaScript. But nonetheless, the need of the industry and the need of individuals to get hold of this increasingly complex environment and simplify it to a single point of management and control is going to drive the development of this OS layer. There are many other layers, as we already said. There could be entertainment, assets, digital files, customization, all of it. But as we move forward, the internet, as we know it today, is increasingly going to resemble something like a piece of baklava, you might say. Layer after layer after layer, moved in, slid in and out off a stack on an as-needed basis. Okay, let's talk about who are the platform contenders who are going to potentially dominate this brave new world. And by the way, all of the major companies understand what's happening. If you've been paying attention to Satya Nadella, he said in a quote, not long ago that, well, Microsoft, wants to get beyond the device. It wants to get beyond the device, and it wants to think more about applications. It believes that subscribers and customers should be focused on an application-centric experience and worry less about devices. Now, it has a reason to do that, and we'll discuss that in greater detail, but it's an interesting thought. Apple has come out with its continuity program, and continuity is also supposed to, in theory, make the device less important and make you, as a customer and a subscriber, more application-centric. It's a popular buzzword these days. Let's not talk about devices. Let's talk about application centricity, or whatever, app-centric worlds. So let's take a look at the major players that we've got here. We've got Apple. And I would say that Apple is the company that has the lead on everyone else in putting together the world of the portable workspace and the transparent cloud. There's to say this, they have a very complete ecosystem. They have desktops. They're not a leader in desktops, but lots of people use Apple desktops, maybe 5 to 10% of the market. Laptops, very popular. Tablets, the leader in tablets. Smartphones, the leader in smartphones. We don't know who's going to lead in smartwatches. Microsoft's smartwatch has been pretty much of a bust. The Google smartwatch, the Android smartwatches, as exemplified by Samsung, have been kind of acceptance in the marketplace. Apple does have some weaknesses. For one thing, it does not have a suite of robust SaaS applications. Okay, Apple has an operating system. It has many services. It has iTunes, a very important application, which rides across many different platforms. Certainly not a business application in many aspects. In terms of who Apple relies on for a business approach to the portable workspace, it's very dependent upon Microsoft. Another problem that Apple faces is that I don't care how wonderful you think the iPhone 6 is and how cool the latest Mac Air with its knife edge profile appears, and how wonderful you think iOS or whichever operating system from Macintosh you most interact with. The reality is no company will ever place all its eggs in any one technology vendor's basket. And let's not forget countries. There are countries where Apple is not beloved by the powers that be, and has to be aware of that. So Apple's DNA, as we all know, it rejects open models. Apple, like every other high-tech company in the business, makes a great deal of noise about how it's open and how it's integration and all the rest of it. But as we all know, that's not what Apple does. Apple creates a unified device application model and then tries to wall it off from the rest of the world and make a great deal of money while doing that. And it makes beautiful devices, and it provides a wonderful application experience in most cases. But it does not want to ever open up its ecosystem and infrastructure to third parties. Nonetheless, and we can see some of these issues that and when you read about how European companies sue this particular company or that particular company because they don't offer choice. Apple has issues in that respect. Another problem, as Apple has found before in the past, after Jobs was kicked out initially of the company, was run by guys like Scully and Michael Spindler and Gil Amelio, and that was that if you don't have a genius at the top of the executive food chain, you have to open up new markets to grow. If you're not opening up new markets all the time and you are the market for a particular device or a particular class of devices, the market can only grow as fast as Apple, because Apple does not like to open up its ecosystem to third parties. But I will say that if Apple is willing to open up, it potentially could rule the world. It could certainly rule the future of the portable workspace and the transparent cloud. But for that to happen, it would have to undergo a resequencing of its corporate DNA. Can it do so? I don't know. It certainly has the potential. Let's take a look at Google's chances in the market. Google also has a very complete ecosystem. It's not as complete as Apple's, but don't forget Google Docs. Now, Google has no desktop. I know that some companies have talked about bringing Android to the desktop, and I think there are some cases where systems are being sold. I think Samsung, Asus, a couple of some of the other major manufacturers are offering Android desktops. I'm not sure how effective that is as a strategy, because Android never was, and I don't see much sign of it ever becoming optimized for the desktop. Of course, you may not care. You're going to say, the desktop is going away. I'm not sure about that. Certainly large screens aren't going to go away. Google has Chrome laptops, and I can tell you that Chrome laptops, particularly in education, are becoming of increasing interest to lots and lots of school districts and kids, because they save you a significant amount of money over conventional Windows laptops. Now, Chrome laptops are very interesting. They can run Google Docs via a SaaS model, of course. They can also run them offline. They can also run whatever applications are designed for the Chrome operating system. And Google has added an interesting capability to the Chrome OS, and that is you can now run Android apps, or basically phone or tablet apps, within Chrome via a virtualization technology. Google has an extensive marketplace in tablets, but let's not forget that while it's a larger market, it's fragmented. And I don't mean it's just fragmented by manufacturers and screen sizes. It's terribly fragmented by operating system versions. My Asus tablet does not have the latest version of Android on it. My wife's tablet has a different version of Android from mine. And you can go back, I think, 4 or 5 major releases since I've bought my tablet. And then, of course, you have all the tablets that were hacked and opened up. And then, of course, you now have Google's attempt through its Silver project to create what you would call the Uber Android tablet. And what Google is hoping is to sort of regain control of the marketplace by creating the ultimate reference device. Same thing with smartphones. Again, a larger market than Apple, but heavily fragmented. And if you've ever used an Android phone, you know that getting an upgrade to the latest version is a very frustrating experience. A lot of times it's not available, whereas with Apple, typically you can go up to the latest version, though if your device becomes too old, you get stuck. Microsoft. Microsoft is the most interesting company of the 3 major players that I'm discussing today, because Microsoft is, in a sense, in the biggest fix I've ever seen the company get itself into since its foundation in 1976. Microsoft has a very complete ecosystem, one that 10 years ago you would have thought was unchallengeable. It dominates the desktop. It dominates laptops. It dominates office applications. It doesn't dominate, but it's an equal player with the open source server systems. It has strong database products. It has strong SaaS offerings via the Azure platform. But here's the big but. Microsoft has minimal market share in tablets. I think right now they're at about 5%. That may be generous. And smartphones, that 4% probably is generous. I would estimate it's closer to 3.5%. What's particularly interesting about smartphones is people probably forget that as late as 2007, Microsoft was the dominant provider of smartphone operating systems. It took them all of a year to lose that lead to Apple with the introduction of the iPhone and the first generation of iOS. But up until that point, it was Microsoft, as we all would have expected, that was the dominant producer of an OS for what we now call the smartphone. But Microsoft is ironically now cut off from the next generation of devices. It's made some massive efforts in smartphones. They purchased Nokia. In tablets, they've gone after the market multiple times with different form factors and strategies. But they failed. And while everyone expects them to hold dominance in the existing device markets, these aren't growing. Tablets, smartphones, and the types of devices which are built upon these two platforms, phablets, and whatever is going to come after the phablet, are the markets of tomorrow, the markets that are growing. And Microsoft is locked out of these markets. It's an amazing thing to see. Now, Microsoft keeps making notes about how it's going to, it's going to come back, it's going to come up with a strategy, but I don't believe that anyone can point to an example of a company losing a dominant OS position and then regaining it within a market segment. Once Apple, which at its when it was a young company, at the birth of the microcomputing industry, held 30% market share in desktop OSs. Once it lost that 30%, it never regained it, even to today. The way that Apple in the marketplace was by opening new categories, basically getting out of business and enterprise computing and moving into consumer electronics. That's how Apple remade itself as a company. Now, because it's become so dominant in those areas, and these devices are so widely used by businessmen all across the world in a variety of ways, it now has an opportunity to re-enter the marketplace for business computing, but it's not doing it by regaining dominance in laptops and desktops. That's yesterday's technology. Let me just sum up and take a quick look at some of the other players that are potentially going to play in the world of the portable workspace and the transparent cloud. We've got Hewlett-Packard. They've talked about an interesting technology called the machine. I don't want to get too technical here, but it's, the machine sounds like something that might appear in my novel, Rule Set. It's a next generation OS running on super duper hardware that runs super duper fast, and with the right software, it just might take over all of humanity. I'm not sure how real the machine is. The CTO of Hewlett-Packard likes to run around and talk about it, but I haven't actually seen it. I don't think anyone else has, but it's something to keep an eye on. Now, Amazon has from time to time made noises about becoming a player in the hardware software industry. I don't think people are taking them that seriously anymore. The Kindle Fire Phone has been an absolute catastrophe. They've lost market share in tablets. Their model of building an ecosystem on top of basically a giant shopping operation has a lot of appeal. It may make them a lot of money, but I don't think that Amazon is where people are going to go for the technology leadership and infrastructure capabilities that would bring a workspace transparent cloud model into being. Oracle. Oracle is not a front-end company. They're not a workspace company, but man, they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes in building the transparent cloud. Increasingly, the service layers that you're going to be using tomorrow are being architected and built by Oracle. I'd keep a strong eye on them. Samsung, the Samsung Galaxy tablet, very popular. It's from time to time given the Apple folks heartburn. I don't see Samsung having the software and the software vision to pull off taking over control of a workspace transparent cloud, but they're certainly a company you'd want to keep an eye on. And then, there's lots of other companies coming in and out of the industry. Who knows, what's going to happen. Okay, I think the end of this presentation for today, about half an hour. I'm going to be available for questions on the 11th. I urge you to swing on by, ask your questions. I'll be here to take them. I'd be glad to listen to any speculations, observations, criticisms, and any other comments that you want to make on the model that you're seeing today. The one thing I will tell you is I am confident that what we discussed today is the future. There are many companies who understand this future, are actively architecting for it, are working furiously to bring it into existence, and you need to start getting ready for it and preparing your business and your revenues to take advantage of it. Thanks. Have a great day.